All right, so you're here, right? And you want to understand something, like, really deeply.
Get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Without drowning in a sea of information.
Totally. That's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive. We take these huge piles of like articles and research and all our own notes, and we pull out the good stuff.
The gems?
Yeah, the gems, those moments that make you go, "Oh, okay, I get it now." And we try to make it fun,
Yeah.
keep things interesting along the way.
Absolutely.
So today we're going deep on something a lot of you have been asking about. Using Buddhist principles, Buddhist practices to find your way through recovery.
Yeah, and not just in the traditional sense of recovery, like from substances.
Right.
We're talking about anything that's got a hold on you. Habits,
Yeah.
behaviors, even relationships that cause you suffering.
Yeah, any kind of addiction, really.
Exactly.
And guiding us today is a collection of writings from folks in the Recovery Dharma community, simply titled Pasted Text. So no fancy names here.
Straight to the point.
Straight to the point. Okay, so recovery, it's a big word, and starting that journey, it can feel pretty intense.
Overwhelming even.
Yeah, overwhelming. There's often this like fear, a sense of loss, letting go of things you're used to, even if they weren't good for you.
And the loneliness.
Yeah.
Oh, the loneliness. It's a common thread, especially in the beginning.
It really is. And I think the biggest thing is recovery can make you question like who you are at your core.
Absolutely. Those habits, those dependencies, they can become so tied up with your sense of self that asking, who am I without this, can be truly unsettling.
It is. It's scary.
Recovery Dharma, though, it gives you this framework, this support system to navigate that change wherever you are on your journey.
Okay, that's good to hear.
And what's really interesting is that you can use these Buddhist practices without having to convert to Buddhism.
Phew, no pressure though.
Right. It's about taking those principles and making them work for you, practically, in your everyday life.
So it's not about adopting a whole new religion. It's more like a toolkit.
I like that, a toolkit. Exactly.
Okay, so what are the core ideas in Buddhism that that apply to overcoming addiction?
Well, the Buddha taught that our minds, when they're ruled by cravings, greed, anger, confusion, they actually become the source of our suffering.
Our own minds.
Our own minds. Think about it. Addiction thrives on these intense cravings, this insatiable desire. That leads to anger at yourself, at others,
Oh, yeah.
and a whole lot of confusion about why you do the things you do.
Makes sense.
So the key here, the big shift, is transforming your mind, your behavior, to break free from that cycle.
So, like, changing your internal landscape.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so how does Recovery Dharma, like, help you do that?
So it focuses on developing wisdom first,
Okay.
understanding the nature of your suffering, then awakening to your potential for freedom, and then cultivating compassion, both for yourself and for others.
That sounds like a pretty big undertaking.
It is a journey.
And the text really emphasizes that there's no single right way to do it, which, I mean, makes sense. Everyone's different.
Exactly. It honors your individual path.
Yeah.
Recognizes that your identities, your life experiences, they all shape your addiction and your recovery.
Right.
Trauma, being part of a minority group, those things matter.
Absolutely.
So Recovery Dharma encourages you to adapt these principles, to create your own personal inquiries, to, foster healing and understanding in your own unique context.
I like that. So it's taking these ancient ideas and making them work in the modern world, in your specific world.
Precisely.
Okay, now I got to ask about this word dharma, because they use it all the time, sometimes with a big G, sometimes with a little d. What's the deal with that?
That's a good catch. Yeah, it can be confusing. Lowercase dharma, it's a Sanskrit word, super broad, meaning truth, phenomena, the way things just are.
Like the underlying reality.
Exactly, the fabric of existence.
Okay.
Now, capital D Dharma, that's specific to the Buddha's teachings, the path, the wisdom he laid out. So it's like understanding both the nature of reality, the lowercase d, and the specific teachings that help us navigate it, the capital D.
So the teachings help us understand the reality. I got it. So how does this dharma, either one, connect to, addiction and recovery?
Well, the Buddha, he saw that every human being, we all experience craving, this desire to change things, you know. Our thoughts, feelings, circumstances, we want things to be different than they are.
I think we all know that feeling.
Right. But for folks dealing with addiction, that craving, it becomes super intense.
Yeah.
It drives those repetitive, harmful behaviors.
Trying to find relief, yeah.
Exactly. So the key insight is that the Buddha, he understood this fundamental human struggle with wanting things to be different.
Interesting. And the text makes it clear that this isn't just for substance abuse, right? They list a whole bunch of addictive behaviors.
Oh, absolutely. It's about any behavior that causes you suffering, that you feel compelled to repeat, even when you know it's harmful.
So it's a much wider scope than just drugs and alcohol.
Much wider. Recovery Dharma is presented as a path to recover from, yeah, substance addiction, alcohol, drugs, but also process addictions. So that includes things like problematic engagement with sex, gambling, pornography,
Oh, wow.
technology addiction, workaholism, codependency, shopping, eating disorders, media, self-harm, lying, stealing, even excessive worrying.
So it really runs the gamut, doesn't it?
It does. The core insight here is that it's about freedom. Freedom from any repetitive habitual behavior that causes suffering. It's about breaking free from those patterns.
That's powerful. And, the text mentions this idea of the program being renunciation-based.
Right.
And that can sound a little, I don't know, intimidating.
It does have a certain ring to it, doesn't it?
It does.
But in this context, renunciation means making a conscious commitment to abstain from your primary addiction.
Okay.
So for substance addictions, that's pretty straightforward. But for those process addictions where complete abstinence might not be realistic or healthy, it's about setting those conscious boundaries, thoughtful limitations around those behaviors. The key insight is that it's about creating a new relationship with those behaviors, not necessarily cutting them out completely.
Okay, so it's not about like cold turkey with everything. It's about being more mindful, more intentional.
Exactly.
I like that. And there's this interesting thing in the text where they say, as you recover from your primary addiction, sometimes other unhealthy behaviors start popping up.
Oh, absolutely. It's like peeling back layers of an onion.
Yeah.
And the approach isn't to get discouraged.
Right.
It's to meet those new challenges with the same principles. Compassion for yourself, understanding the root causes, and just patient self-investigation.
So it's an ongoing process, constantly learning and adapting.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important aspect of Recovery Dharma. It's peer-led.
So there's no one guru, no single authority figure.
Nope. It's about people supporting each other as equals, as partners on this path. The focus isn't on following strict rules, but on discovering your own personal truth.
Because what works for one person might not work for everyone.
Exactly. And they see this approach as being compatible with other spiritual paths, other recovery programs you might be involved in.
So it's not in either. It can work alongside other things.
Right. The key insight is that your own experience, your own wisdom is at the center of your recovery.
That makes sense. And they really emphasize the need for honesty, like radical honesty and understanding, awareness, integrity.
Oh, absolutely. They stress that this is an ongoing process, a constant evolution, taking ownership of your choices and being responsible for your own healing. And what's really important is that the motivation shouldn't be shame or guilt.
Right. That never works long term.
No, it doesn't. It's about mindfulness, kindness toward yourself, generosity, forgiveness, and deep compassion.
That's a much better foundation, I think.
It is.
They also talk about renouncing violence and harm.
Yes. Choosing nonviolence in every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And forgiveness, forgiving yourself, forgiving others. It's seen as a powerful tool for healing and moving forward.
Because you can't really move forward if you're still holding on to all that resentment.
Exactly. Letting go of those burdens is key. And the program also acknowledges, life is going to happen. There's going to be pain. There's going to be disappointment.
You can't avoid all the tough stuff.
Nope. The focus isn't on escaping pain, but on changing how you relate to it. It's about learning skillful ways to work through those difficult emotions, through understanding, compassion, forgiveness, and gaining deeper insight.
So changing your relationship to pain instead of trying to just make it disappear.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, for someone listening who's thinking, all right, this sounds good, where do I start? Where does the text recommend beginning?
Well, the first key area is understanding and using the Four Noble Truths as a guide.
The Four Noble Truths, those are pretty fundamental to Buddhism, right?
They are, and Recovery Dharma emphasizes experiencing these truths directly, not just knowing them intellectually.
So putting them into practice.
Yes. It encourages you to trust your own potential for awakening through this process of learning by doing. The core insight is that you already have everything you need within you for change to happen.
You have the power to heal yourself.
Exactly.
And what's the second key area?
Practicing the Eightfold Path. This is both a philosophy for living and a practical plan for taking action in ways that don't create more harm.
Okay, so the Four Noble Truths as the foundation, the Eightfold Path as the steps you take. Got it. What else?
Then, establishing a regular meditation practice. It's crucial for self-investigation, for really looking deeply into your own mind, your patterns, your behaviors. The key insight is that meditation is a powerful tool for understanding yourself, your suffering, and finding freedom through that self-knowledge.
So meditation isn't just about relaxation, it's about like seeing yourself more clearly.
Exactly.
Got it.
And the text introduces the three jewels of Buddhism.
The three jewels being the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha.
Yes, exactly. They offer this framework for cultivating wisdom, ethical conduct, and spiritual practice, all of which support recovery.
Okay. And the final key area is using what they call inquiries for self-exploration.
Right. These are specific questions designed to help you go deeper, to examine your experiences more thoroughly.
And you can use them on your own, with a friend, a mentor, a group.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself the tough questions, exploring your experiences honestly, which can lead to a lot of healing and understanding.
So it's a very active approach, you know, really engaging with the process.
Absolutely. It's a continuous practice, they say. Meditation, attending meetings, engaging in self-reflection through these inquiries, all aimed at developing that insight and compassion, breaking free from that illusion of escape that addiction offers.
Because addiction promises escape, but it doesn't deliver, does it?
It doesn't. It just keeps you trapped.
Right. Okay, so they outline some core commitments within the practice, the actual doing of it. What are the main ones?
Well, the first is renunciation, which we talked about earlier.
Right, setting those boundaries, that commitment to not using your primary addiction to escape.
Exactly. The key insight is the intention to stop using those addictive behaviors to check out of present reality.
So it's about changing your relationship with escape.
Exactly.
Okay, what's next?
Meditation. The intention is to develop a daily practice, to really investigate your actions, your intentions, the nature of your mind.
And doing it consistently, right?
Yes. Yes, with balanced effort, not pushing too hard, not giving up too easily. The core insight is the commitment to regular self-observation.
So making it a part of your routine.
Yeah. And then attending meetings, going to those recovery meetings regularly.
Whether it's specifically Recovery Dharma or other groups.
Exactly. And becoming an active part of that community, sharing your experience, offering support, especially in early recovery, that sense of belonging is so important.
Community seems to be a big theme here.
It is, and we'll talk more about that Sangha aspect in a bit.
Okay, great. So what else is on the list of commitments?
The path itself. Really deepening your understanding of the Four Noble Truths, practicing the Eightfold Path. It's about embodying those principles, not just thinking about them.
Living it, not just reading about it.
Exactly.
And then there's inquiry and investigation.
Right. Using those written inquiries, often with guidance from a mentor or a therapist, to explore the Four Noble Truths in your own life. And this involves taking responsibility for any harm you might have caused and making amends.
Which can be a tough but necessary part of recovery.
It is.
Okay, so what's next?
Sangha, wise friends and mentors. Actively cultivating those supportive relationships.
About finding your people.
Exactly. And as you progress, you can become a mentor yourself, offering that support to others.
And they talk about wise friends too, even if you don't have a formal mentor.
Yes. Connecting with people for that mutual inquiry, that shared exploration. And finally, growth. It's this lifelong commitment to studying, practicing, deepening your understanding of these Buddhist principles.
So recovery isn't a destination, it's a journey.
Exactly. It's ongoing learning and development.
I like that. Okay, so now let's talk about those three jewels in more detail, starting with the Buddha. And it's interesting, they talk about both Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, and this more universal potential for awakening.
Right. It's both specific and universal.
So how do they tie that into recovery?
Well, in the beginning, when you're first starting recovery, the focus is often on just stopping the pain, putting an end to those harmful behaviors.
Right, just getting through the day.
Exactly. But the text points out that the very fact that you're seeking recovery, that you're even interested in this, shows that there's a spark of wisdom within you.
A desire for something better.
Yes, a longing to end suffering. And that first step, that willingness to change, that's connecting with a pure, wise part of yourself.
So it's recognizing that you already have that wisdom inside you.
Exactly. And it acknowledges, the pain, the potential trauma that often leads to addiction. But recovery starts when you begin to trust in that pure, radiant, and courageous heart within you.
Even if it feels buried under a lot of other stuff right now.
Even then, it's there. And the story of Siddhartha Gautama, the original Buddha, shows us that liberation is possible. He's an example of what's possible.
So his journey is a source of inspiration and hope.
It is. The text uses the word Buddha, which means awakened, in two main ways.
Okay.
First, it's the title for Siddhartha Gautama, the guy who, through his own efforts, woke up to the nature of suffering and how to end it.
Right.
And second, it refers to a potential for awakening that exists within each of us. So when you take refuge in the Buddha, you're not worshiping a historical figure.
It's more about trusting in your own potential for liberation.
Exactly, just as he found his own freedom.
And they briefly tell his story, about his privileged upbringing and then his encounter with suffering.
Yeah. So even though he had a comfortable life, Siddhartha felt this deep dissatisfaction, this sense of not enough.
Which, honestly, a lot of people struggling with addiction can relate to.
Absolutely. It's that constant seeking, even when things on the surface seem fine.
Right.
So he realizes that material comfort, it doesn't shield you from aging, sickness, death, the hard parts of life.
That desire for something more is always there.
It is. So he leaves his comfortable life, tries extreme asceticism, denying himself everything, but that doesn't work either.
So it's not about punishing yourself.
No. Then he finds this middle path, and through deep meditation, he discovers the Dharma, the truth about suffering, and how to end it.
Including the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path.
Exactly. And that's how he becomes the Buddha, the one who woke up.
Because he saw through the illusion, right.
Yeah, he saw the true nature of reality. And from then on, he dedicated his life to sharing the Dharma, creating a community, the Sangha. And his big message was that liberation is possible for everyone, because we all have that capacity for wisdom and compassion within us.
So no matter how stuck you feel, there's always a way out.
Exactly.
And the text connects his journey to our own struggles with addiction.
Yeah, just like Siddhartha, we experience that dissatisfaction, even when we seemingly have everything we need. We try to find relief through our addictions, but it's temporary, fleeting.
That chasing after that next high.
Yeah, and the text makes it clear that the Buddha, he started with suffering, just like we might be experiencing it now. And this path is about our own practice, our own efforts, not blind faith.
Taking responsibility.
Exactly. You don't have to become a Buddhist. You don't have to meditate for hours a day. The principles, those Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, they offer a way out of the suffering, both the suffering of addiction and the suffering that just comes with being human.
That's encouraging. Okay, so we've covered the Buddha. Now let's talk about the Dharma, the truth. And the focus here is on the Four Noble Truths.
Yes, and the text starts by acknowledging that if you're struggling with addiction, you already know the first truth intimately.
The truth of suffering.
Exactly, or dukkha, as they call it in Buddhism.
Dukkha.
And it can be powerful to just have that acknowledged, that your suffering is real. The Buddha, he didn't just identify suffering, he offered a way out.
The path to liberation.
Yeah, and those Four Noble Truths, they're the heart of that teaching and the foundation of Recovery Dharma.
Okay, so remind us what those four truths are and the commitments associated with each one.
So the first one is, there is suffering.
Simple but powerful.
It is. And the commitment associated with that is understanding the truth of suffering, really seeing it clearly.
Yeah.
The second truth is, there's a cause of suffering. And that cause is craving or thirst or clinging.
That desire for things to be different.
Exactly. And the commitment is to understand that craving is what fuels suffering. Got it.
The third truth is, there is a way of ending suffering. And that way is to lessen craving.
To let go of that attachment.
Exactly. And the commitment is to understand that, to experience it for yourself, to see that when you lessen craving, suffering decreases.
Okay.
And the fourth truth is, there is a path that leads to the end of suffering. And that path is the Eightfold Path.
The practical steps to take.
Right. And the commitment there is to cultivate that path, to walk it, to practice it.
So those four truths, they offer a roadmap.
They do. A way to navigate out of suffering.
Okay, so let's dive into the first noble truth. There is suffering. What kinds of suffering are we talking about in the context of addiction?
Well, the text highlights both those obvious kinds, like physical pain, disappointment,
Right.
and the less obvious ones, like cravings, anxiety, stress.
It all counts.
It does. And then there's the inherent suffering that just comes with being human.
Yeah.
Birth, aging, sickness, death. And suffering, it arises when we cling to this idea that things can be permanent, when we resist reality, try to control it, Which is like the opposite of acceptance.
It is.
And in addiction, you see that in the constant struggle against cravings and the pain of withdrawal.
Absolutely. The text actually points out that addiction itself is a form of suffering.
Oh, how so?
Well, we suffer through obsession, guilt, the inability to control our use even when it's hurting us.
You know you should stop, but you can't.
Right. And we try to ease that suffering with the very thing that's causing it, whether it's a substance or a behavior.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. We cling to this illusion that we can manage it, that we
Yeah.
can escape the discomfort.
But we can't.
But we can't. True freedom comes from understanding this cycle, seeing it for what it is.
Okay, so understanding is the first step.
It is.
They also talk about trauma and attachment injury.
Yeah, how those past experiences can make suffering so much worse and make us more prone to addiction as a way to cope.
Because it's like those old wounds make you more sensitive to pain now.
It's like a vulnerability.
Yeah.
And those experiences can create this baseline of anxiety, fear, that makes it hard to be present, to trust yourself, to trust others.
And the text offers those inquiries, those questions, to guide self-reflection for the first noble truth. What kind of questions are they?
Well, they ask you to list those harmful behaviors, the ones associated with your addiction, the specific ways they've caused suffering in your life, any patterns you've noticed.
So really getting specific about your experience.
Exactly. And there are questions about whether you might be using addiction to cope with past trauma, and if so, how can you address that trauma in healthier ways now?
Because healing from trauma is so important.
It is. And for those who've experienced discrimination, there are specific inquiries for practicing healing and self-care in that context.
Okay, that makes sense. So moving on to the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. And they identify that cause as craving.
Right. It's that persistent desire for things to be different than they are, that resistance to reality.
That I want feeling.
Yes. And the text makes an important distinction here, saying that suffering caused by things like oppression and discrimination, that shouldn't be passively accepted.
Right, that requires action.
It does. Wise action, boundaries, compassion. But in general, our suffering comes from clinging to things that are impermanent, chasing this illusion of lasting satisfaction.
Always looking for that next thing to make us happy.
Exactly. And addiction is a prime example of that relentless craving.
It is. So the second truth is really about understanding those cravings, seeing how they drive our suffering.
It is.
Okay, and the inquiries for the second noble truth help us dig deeper into our own cravings. What do they ask?
They ask you to think about the situations and emotions you've tried to avoid through your addiction.
What are you running from?
Right. And how do you feel when you abstain, when you try to stop? What have you given up for your addiction? What beliefs are driving those cravings, those aversions? And for those dealing with suffering caused by discrimination, there are questions about how to address that without creating more suffering through unhealthy coping.
So finding healthier ways to deal with the pain.
Exactly.
All right, now for the good part. The third noble truth, the end of suffering. This is where things start looking up, right?
This is where the hope comes in. This truth states that it is possible to end suffering.
It's possible.
It is. And that happens by understanding the nature of craving and the truth that all experiences are impermanent. They come and go.
So nothing lasts forever, good or bad.
Exactly. And understanding that allows you to see your desires, your disappointments in a new light. You start to relate to them differently.
And that's where the possibility for recovery lies.
It is. You have the power to choose how you respond to your thoughts and feelings. You don't have to be a slave to them.
You have a choice.
You do. And by reducing greed, hatred, and confusion in your mind, you directly reduce your suffering.
That's empowering.
It is. The power of recovery lies in recognizing that your happiness and suffering, they largely depend on your own responses. You have agency.
You're not just a victim of your circumstances. Okay. And the inquiries for the third noble truth, they explore the challenges you've faced in trying to quit.
Yes. The resources available to you, the reasons you have for believing in recovery, any doubts that come up, and the practice of letting go.
Letting go, that seems like a crucial skill to develop.
It is.
And that brings us to the fourth noble truth, the path to ending suffering.
And that path, as you mentioned earlier, is the Eightfold Path.
The practical guide to putting all of this into action.
It is. The Buddha taught that by living ethically, cultivating mindfulness and concentration, and developing wisdom and compassion, you can overcome suffering. The Eightfold Path, it lays out the steps for that journey.
And it's not just about ending the suffering of addiction, it's about ending suffering in general.
Right. It's about finding a more skillful way to live.
Okay, so remind us what those 8 aspects are.
Wise understanding, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise concentration.
Eightfold Path, 8 aspects. Got it.
They often group these into 3 categories: wisdom, ethics, and concentration. And they all work together to support each other.
So it's a holistic approach.
It is. And the text is very clear that everyone will understand and practice these differently.
Because we're all individuals.
Exactly. It's about your own unique development in these areas.
And as you understand those 4 noble truths more deeply, your practice of the Eightfold Path will also deepen.
It will. They see the Eightfold Path as a way of life, something that can be practiced by anyone, regardless of their religious beliefs.
So it's accessible to everyone.
It is.
Okay. And the inquiries for the 4th noble truth, they focus on your specific path, the behaviors you want to change, and what it means for you personally to take refuge in the 3 jewels.
Right. So it's really bringing it all together, applying these concepts to your own life.
Okay, great. Now let's get into the details of the Eightfold Path, starting with wise understanding.
Okay. The key insight here is learning to see the world and your experiences clearly without the distortions of clinging and craving.
Seeing things as they are, not as you want them to be.
Exactly. So wise understanding is about living without being attached to outcomes, without those strong cravings, without needing things to go a certain way. And it involves paying attention to your actions and their consequences.
So that's where the principle of karma comes in.
Exactly. Karma, in this context, is about intentional actions.
Thoughts, words, and deeds, they all have an impact.
They do. And those actions can create balance or imbalance. They can lead to happiness or suffering.
So it's cause and effect. What you put out comes back to you.
Right. And wise understanding is realizing that you're responsible for your own well-being.
Your choices have consequences.
They do. And those choices are shaped by your state of mind.
So if you act from a place of wisdom and compassion, you're more likely to create positive outcome.
Exactly. And if you act from ignorance, anger, selfishness, that's when suffering arises.
This makes sense.
But the text is careful to point out that you're not responsible for the pain that others inflict on you.
Right, because that's a really important distinction. You're not to blame for being hurt by someone else.
Exactly. But you are responsible for how you respond to that hurt.
So taking responsibility for your own healing.
Yeah. Wise understanding helps you to see how your past choices have contributed to where you are now and how you can make different choices moving forward.
It's about taking ownership of your life.
It is. And the inquiries for wise understanding, they encourage you to analyze those situations that confuse you, to really look at the difference between your wants and your needs.
Needs versus desires.
Right. To observe how your actions create consequences and to reflect on your past behavior.
So it's a lot of self-reflection.
It is.
Okay, so next is wise intention. And the focus here seems to be on non-harming.
Yes. Cultivating this attitude of not causing harm to yourself or others. And it involves detaching from those overwhelming cravings.
Because those cravings can lead us to do things we regret.
Absolutely. So wise intention guides you to act from a place of kindness and compassion rather than from confusion, ill will, or self-centeredness.
Which can be a real challenge when you're in the grip of addiction.
It can be. A key element of wise intention is generosity.
The generosity.
Yes. It's about letting go of that tight grip on mine, me, I want.
Which is so common in addiction, that self-centeredness.
It is. And generosity,